So this video is going to talk about the AP Literature and Composition exam. Focus primarily on the multiple choice sections, some tips and strategies when you are navigating through that part of the exam. First, let's talk about the format of the test. Overall, the test is split into two. You have the multiple choice section and then you have the essay section. For the multiple choice, you're given 4 passages total. 2 of those will be prose passages, meaning written in story-like form. So you might have an excerpt from a novel or a short story. 2 of those passages will be verse, meaning poetry. Sometimes they'll give you an entire poem that they want you to analyze. Sometimes they give you 2 shorter poems to juxtapose. So it all depends on what is scheduled for this year. You have 60 minutes to complete the multiple choice sections. A good rule of thumb, because you do not have to do them in any specific order, is to approach the sections that you feel most strong in. So if I feel that I'm better in poetry, I would probably want to start with those sections first. That way it frees up some time at the end for me to do the prose sections, or vice versa. The multiple choice is 45% of the overall score. And I'm going to talk to you about how that scoring is done. I'm going to give you a brief show of something that the AP College Board site gave out, because I'm not super familiar with this, but it changed recently. It used to be for every question you got wrong, you lost a quarter of a point, and now it is straight right or wrong. You don't get any points for wrong answers or blank answers, and you get 1 full point for correct answers. So a good rule of thumb is to narrow, if you can narrow down your choices to 2 or 3, it's okay to guess because you're not going to lose points for getting a wrong answer other than just getting it wrong. So that's a nice change that they made recently. So you can see here that there are 55 multiple choice questions for the prose section, and there's a multiplier to give you your weighted section score. And then for the free response, which is the essay portion, you'll see that you have 3 questions. 1 question is going to be based on a prose passage, 1 will be based on verse, and the 3rd will be an open-ended. Now, we in this class have talked a lot about the different prompts, and we've been working on explicating prompts and writing in response to those. So you should be pretty familiar with that. You are given 2 hours for that section, and that is given a 55% weight of the overall score. So they show you the multiplier there. So some general tips for taking any standardized test. There are 2 rules of thumb. There's one option and then there's a second option. The first option, if you want to read the passage first, so you're reading it cold and you're underlining the main ideas, so you have a basic idea of what's going on before you go into the questions. Read the stem of the multiple choice question. That means I read what the question is asking before I look at the choices, and then I'm going to answer it in my own words. So if I had to answer the question, if I didn't have any choices provided, how would I answer that? Then I look for the choice that matches most closely with my answer. If none of the choices match, then you need to go back into the text to find evidence for each choice. If you can't find the evidence, then that can be eliminated. So this is kind of a way for you to read first so you have an idea before you go into the questions. The second option is very similar, except you're going to read the stems first, so you know what to look for when you read the passage. So if I read all of the multiple choice questions first, and then as I'm reading, I would underline anything I remember from those multiple choice questions, then I would go back and kind of follow the same thing. I'm going to read the question, answer it in my own words, find the choice that matches most closely, and then go back and eliminate it. Now, we've talked about them trying to be tricky with these and making a lot of the choices seem right, but not necessarily the best. So you need to make sure you're reading those choices closely. The different types of questions that you will see on the AP Literature and Composition test will be focusing on the central or main idea of the passage. They will ask you to look at and analyze specific supporting details, so they'll reference probably line numbers. They're going to ask you a lot about purpose, why the author does what he or she does. They will also ask you about inferences, where you are going to have to draw a conclusion based on what you have read. They might ask for you to give synonyms for a word as it is used in the context. This can be tricky because sometimes the words used in context are meant to be used in a different connotation than its actual denotation. And then, yes, literary terms and figurative language, like metaphor and imagery and the things that we've been discussing all year. Text organization also, why are the paragraphs organized the way they are or are not? Why are the poems organized the way they are things that you need to look for. Formatting. So I spent a lot of time going through various previously released tests to get an idea of what the different structures are. So if you look here, I've screenshotted some, and you will notice that you are always given 5 choices per section. Sometimes they will reference specific line numbers, like in the example up top, the image of the great journey, line 37. So you can go back and see it in context. That's really important because especially for that particular example, it's saying it's a reference to, and so you're going to need to see what's around that to be able to answer that question. This one in the middle is a little bit tricky because they give you 3 or 4 options, and then there might be multiple that go together. It's personally the bane of my existence whenever I test take, but it's something that you might see maybe once or twice. And then lastly, distractors and qualifiers. Now, these are the ones that they do on purpose to try to trick you up. And some examples of those distractors will be words like not, least, except, best, primarily, most likely. When I talked earlier about having choices that are multiple, they seem like they could be right, that's when these distractors and qualifiers come into play. So like a choice might be correct, but it's not the best one. A lot of students, when they take multiple choice tests, they skim over the choices and they skip over the word except, so they end up missing that one. So it's really important to pay attention to the distractors and qualifiers that are in the multiple choice step. Verbs that are used most frequently in the test, they will use verbs like the author implies, suggests, hints, describes. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but just be familiar with what these words are. Yes, I did go through several previous tests and pull these out for your benefit, so make sure you understand what they mean. Skip the head there. Okay. So if you want to pause here and take those down, feel free to do that. Okay? Little humor. We talk about the different types of literary elements and devices that we will see on the AP test. So in order of frequency, I'm definitely not going to read all of these out to you, but you will notice that the ones that are coming up, like the use of figurative language in general, best meanings. So these are like in order of frequency. So you're going to see these ones the most. And there's a bunch more. So I'm just going to kind of, when you want to pause at the end, write them down. Maybe not write all of them down, but write down the ones that you have no idea of what's going on. Never seen them before in your life. That way, some of them you'll be real familiar with and some of them not so much. Like I'm willing to bet parallelism, pronoun antecedent, negation, enumeration, syllogism you probably recognize from math class. But the other ones I think you should be pretty familiar with at this point.